The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mind Garden Media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions. We're back with another episode of the Sandy and Toddcast, and it's more history is no mystery.
You just asked me what it was, and you got it wrong. Yes, history ain't no mystery. We're on episode 4 this week already, and we're talking about Door County and the Door Peninsula in Wisconsin.
Can't wait for it. That is coming up next on the Sandy and Toddcast.
Feeling a bit lost? Not sure what's holding you back? A transformational tarot session with Eclectic Path Wellness can provide the guidance you need, combining tarot and coaching to help you understand and navigate the changes you may face. Heal, empower, and clarify your path. Connect with us on Facebook at Eclectic Path Wellness.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Welcome again to the Sandy and Toddcast. She is Sandy.
And he is Todd.
And it's more history, ain't no mystery, or whatever we're kind of calling it. As we're kind of going back in time and talking about some of the experiences we've had. And we really talked a little about how important history is when investigating locations, you know, and well,
Yeah. History and investigations and the spiritual world, they all kind of go hand in hand. And the more investigations we do, Todd, the more we sort of realize that. The more experiences we have, it sort of shapes our thought process around history and the tie-in between the paranormal, spiritual world and history. And without one, you don't have the other, I guess. Or without history, you don't have the paranormal world, definitely. They really do tie into each other. So we've been discussing the first 3 episodes we're discussing, and today, our trip to the Door County and Door Peninsula last June when Dave and I came out to go on vacation with you, and some of the places that we went and the experiences and the feelings that we have had, and then sort of tying that in with the history of the location. And this week we're going to talk about Cana Island and the Cana Island Lighthouse, and then a really brief talk about the Door Peninsula Winery that we stopped at on our way back to Oshkosh, and a little bit about our experiences there and the things that we went through, the things that I guess we discovered on that trip and that particular day. And it was pretty enlightening.
It's hard to believe it's almost been a year.
I know.
But it really has, you know?
I know. And I can only speak for myself, but I had probably and now I've been to so many places across the United States, really cool places, haunted and not. And this was probably one of the best vacations that I've ever experienced, just because we got to spend time together, like true quality time together. Wasn't the first time, but this one was really, really special. And it also was just so many experiences and so many things to learn and feel and see. And it was just a wonderful time. So today we're going to talk about our trip to the Cana Island Lighthouse and what that meant for us. Little bit of background on the lighthouse itself. Cana Island is an island in Lake Michigan. It's in the town of Bailey's Harbor in Door County in Wisconsin. And it was built, I did not know this, Todd. It was built in 1869 for $12,792.55. That's how much it cost. The lighthouse itself was the original keeper's quarters. So when you look at the lighthouse, you see sort of like, some lighthouses don't have the keeper's quarters attached to them and others do. There's all kinds of styles and sizes. And this one did, though. And I'm sure that kicks up quite a bit of activity in and of itself. There's 102 steps to the top of the tower. Cana Island Lighthouse's tower is made of Cream City brick. It was the tallest building in Door County at the time. It was verified by telescope during the first year of operation. 4,862 ships passed the station during daylight hours. Keepers filled the oil and kept the beacon shining until the lighthouse was automated in 1944, and it remains a functioning navigational light of the Great Lakes to this day. It was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1976, and on April 27, 2006, the Bureau of Land Management transferred ownership of the land free of charge to Door County to be used as a park, as well as to preserve the lighthouse while allowing public access to it. To fulfill the stipulations, the Door County partnered with Door County Maritime Museum to manage the island and the lighthouse. And that's something Door County Maritime Museum has done in partnership with the U.S. Coast Guard since 1970. So all of the fees that are generated from going there, and it's very minimal, are shared but designated for lighthouse preservation and restoration. So just a beautiful, beautiful idea. It is an actual park. And I was really excited. I didn't know much about it when you suggested we go, but I knew you loved it there. I knew you did.
Yeah, it's I will tell you that when we went, we were not able to go inside because they were still doing a lot of restoration on the inside.
Right.
But I have obviously gone there several times in my life, investigated inside the keeper's quarters and the lighthouse itself. And it's just very, very wonderful. There was a different Bailey's Harbor lighthouse that had been constructed prior to this one. And once they got it constructed, they realized it wasn't worth crap. It wasn't working as a navigational tool. So that one it was immediately decommissioned when Cana Island was put up. They ended up wrapping with the Cream City brick. For anybody that doesn't know it, is really from Milwaukee. It's a brick that was made in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's known as Cream City for whatever reason. And a lot of lighthouses were built with this brick, and it really doesn't stand up to weather very well. It erodes very easily. And there are several lighthouses on the Great Lakes that were made out of this brick. And what they ended up having to do is basically surround the brick with metal steel plates. And so if you go there now, it's metal and it's very beautiful and all that kind of stuff. So it's very special. I've always liked lighthouses. It has a sister lighthouse in Michigan called Little Sable. All that remains at that particular location, right on the water, right on the beach, is the actual lighthouse itself. The keeper's quarters and stuff like that are gone. But it has several sister lighthouses on the Great Lakes that look exactly like it, were kind of built to those specifications. And when you think of a lighthouse, you kind of think of the way this one looks, the way the little black top is on there, the railing that goes around the outside. It's kind of like the typical lighthouse that you picture in your mind.
It's something, and that's yet another thing you and I have always had in common, is that I am a lighthouse person too. And anytime Dave and I travel, we always, if we're going to be near the water, we always seek out a lighthouse. Always. It never fails. From Maine all the way to Florida and, anywhere else that we can find one. And it is too. It's sort of, you're right. It's sort of like what you would picture your stereotypical lighthouse book front cover picture.
Right. Yep.
It's just absolutely beautiful. And I didn't realize how breathtaking the whole island and the view and everything about it would be until we actually got there. Because you kind of drive a little bit. Now, we stayed in Sister Bay and we had to drive south. So it was kind of on our way home. We planned it so that we'd stop on our way back to Oshkosh the last day that we were there. And you drive a little bit and you get out there. There's a little parking area and it doesn't seem like much. And then you get down, you walk a little bit and you get down to where the sort of pebble rock beach is of the mainland. And you see this island, which sometimes is a true island and sometimes isn't a true island.
Depending on how the water is for Lake Michigan, correct?
Exactly. And that's one of the coolest things about this island is that depending on the water for Lake Michigan, sometimes you can actually walk across and there's a walkway that you can walk right to the island. And if you can't, there's this wonderful older gentleman who has a tractor and a cart, like a wagon, that you get in, and he brings you across. And I just remember the four of us just kind of laughing because it is probably one of the bumpiest rides you could ever imagine across to the island. And we're like, whoa. But it was really, really fun, actually. And he's very nice and very knowledgeable. And so we get over there, and what a gorgeous island.
Yeah.
Not huge, not as big as some of them, but rather large anyways, and just absolutely stunning. I can understand why you love it.
Yeah, and we were there on the perfect day because the weather was beautiful and the water, you could smell the water and that smelled good and there was a breeze, so that was good. I mean, everything was perfect for that day. But you think about it, and let's say it was during a period of time when you were secluded out there and maybe the water in Lake Michigan wasn't frozen over. Getting back and forth would be rather difficult. You'd have to take a boat back and forth. And so you are kind of stranded out there. If you are the lightkeeper, if you're the lightkeeper's family, that little plot of land is your life. And you know, we talked a lot about, and you can imagine being a lightkeeper back in the day and using oil and stuff like that to light these huge lamps and having to basically be awake throughout the evening hours just to make sure they stay lit. Just a lot of hard work. And it was the lightkeeper, too, that kept the grounds up and built the fences. There were like stone walls out there and things like that. And that was built by the lightkeepers. So it was a life. They
were fully engulfed in their lives and the life, literally life of the island.
Right.
In those days. And, you know, as you were speaking, I was thinking about it, too. I mean, is it any wonder that places like lighthouses are so active paranormally? Because these people put their heart and their soul into this lifestyle, into living in these places and taking care of them and growing them and making them their own and giving to others. Because let's face it, to be a lightkeeper is a gift because what it does is save lives.
Right.
And so I just guess I never really thought of it quite that way until you were speaking. But is it any wonder why their energy isn't at least somewhat imprinted on these lands, these islands, these coastlines where the lighthouses are? It's pretty amazing.
Right. I mean, and then you're talking about being on the water and all that kind of stuff. And who knows what kind of stone or rock the island is sitting on. I don't know that for sure. But man, it's just a really, really special place. And for me, it's a place of peace.
And I remember, not to jump ahead too quickly, but I remember it was funny, but it was wonderful to see you when we were waiting for the gentleman to come back with his tractor to bring us back to the car. You went over into the little wooded area and you just kind of hugged the tree.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about grounding on this podcast, but what a grounding experience that is to be in a beautiful place, beautiful nature after the experiences, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, experiences that we had that day there, to just kind of ground yourself and be one with nature in such a beautiful place. It was really wonderful. Yeah.
I could find myself living there as long as I didn't have to make sure that ships didn't have accidents, because I would not want to be put in charge of that.
Or that you didn't have to rely on the older gentleman with the tractor and the wagon.
I think we could have probably walked across if we wanted to, but with my bad knee and your clumsiness, I think that would have been just a recipe for disaster.
You know, the water that day literally was only probably about 3 inches. I mean, it really wasn't that high on that particular day. So we probably could have, but, you know, given the fact that we did have a lot of things working against us physically, it probably wasn't the best idea. So, but yeah, so what a beautiful place. So we get over there. And of course, we brought a little equipment because the lighthouse and the island were one of the episodes on the show that you did, the Amazon Prime show, Haunted State. And we kind of tongue-in-cheek called our vacation last year Return to Haunted State because we visited so many places that were featured in the show. And this being one of them. So we couldn't go there and visit without bringing some equipment. So I brought a Melmeter and you brought a K2 and my digital recorder. And there weren't a ton of people there that day.
No.
There were just a handful of people, so it made it rather easy for us. And by this point, at this point in our quote unquote careers, Todd, it's like, who cares? Just do what you want to do and enjoy it. So we did. And we visited the beach a little bit. And then you and I, everybody kind of wandered off. And then you and I, there were some benches around the property that had been dedicated in memory of some different people who either volunteered on the island or were some sort of integral part of the island, whether it was the upkeep or whatever it happened to be. There were a couple of them. And again, like you said, we couldn't go into the lighthouse. So we sort of made do with what was around us. And we went to one of the benches and we videoed are having an actual conversation, or what we believe to be a conversation, with, first of all, the first one was a couple who I believe volunteered point, and so their family dedicated a bench to them. And we actually interacted and got some hits on the K2, some intelligent semi hits, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That was cool and very unexpected. I think
Yes.
I think because a lot of times when you start investigating, it takes a while for you to get response. Mm-hmm. And this was like we turned the stuff on and boom, we were already having that conversation. It was so fast.
It was funny because really that vacation was the first time that, other than Ed Gein the September before when we did our...
And the grave dancing. Right.
And the grave dancing. Other than that...
She's doing a moonwalk on Augusta Gein's grave.
I was not doing the moonwalk.
Doing the hee-hee.
I did a jig, I think it was. It was more like a jig. But other than that, we hadn't really investigated together in person. And this vacation was our first time. And so far, going to Washington Island, it was like craziness. And it was really, really cool. And so, but we weren't really expecting too much at Cana Island and at the lighthouse. We just sort of brought the stuff just to see.
Sure.
And I was amazed that right off the bat, there's somebody who wants to talk to us. Now, I sometimes wonder, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, I think, next week, we're going to talk next week about my recent trip down to Pennsylvania to visit some deceased family members in the cemetery. And I sometimes wonder if people who are more open, like me, like you, because we know that these energies, these spirits tend to be a little more drawn to us. Do they tend to want to communicate with us? So, for example, if Dave, who's maybe not most open, if he tried, would it work for him?
Right.
I don't know. But for us, it literally happened instantaneously. And it sort of taught us, too, about our chemistry as investigators and taught us some lessons. This trip taught us some lessons about it. And so that was wonderful. And we thought, okay, let's see if we can have it happen again. So we moved about 25, 30 feet to a second bench. This was Reverend Bletcher. And it happened again.
It sure did. Again, surprisingly.
Yes. And we asked some really interesting questions. We asked things like, does part of your energy stay here? Do other parts of your energy, are they at other places? Because this was in the really beginning stages of us forming this idea that spirits aren't necessarily bound to one location.
Right.
That they can visit, that they can come and go. And the Reverend did not disappoint. He answered us quite willingly a lot of times and responded to us intelligently. And so we were kind of giddy high by this time with the fact that all of this was going on. And especially with people walking around. And there was the occasional person walking around. And so then we walked around a little bit. We went into, what was that little round building, Todd?
So that was the oil building. That's where the oil would have been stored. And I just want to add in really quickly, like, we didn't spend a lot of time at either bench. However, we didn't leave because the activity stopped. We left because there were people around and we wanted to check some other things out. We probably could have stayed a lot longer at both of those locations and just kept going.
Yes. And that's so cool, too. I mean, if you think about that, like we could have probably spent a day there and just talked to whoever whatever was there, and found out lots more information from them, you know. So, but we knew we had limited time. So we went over to I just thought I'd mention this. Not that we haven't really proven it or disproven it, but I thought it was interesting. We went over to the oil room, little round oil building, stuck the millimeter in there, went in with the millimeter, and it hit like 162.
Yep. Which
was really strange. And it was only one hit. I don't know if there was any electricity in that room of any
Still
kind.
Really high for electricity, though. You know what I'm saying? And we couldn't stay there because we heard people coming and we had to get the hell out of there. But that's one location where I think if we would have spent a little bit of time in there, we probably could have gotten some answers as to what the hell that was.
I think so. That's one unfortunate thing is we weren't no longer, because a spike of 162, whether it's 10 spikes or one spike, is rather unusual. Yeah. And at this point in our investigating experience, I mean, I was literally in the middle of that round room. So, and it was stone. So, what is what and how your equipment will interact with electricity or anything like that. So that was just a really interesting experience.
In my mind's eye, it was almost like we walked in on something.
Yeah.
And it shot out and it just left. Right?
Yeah. And it left. Like we took it by surprise.
Yeah.
We just hit it. And that kind of happened to me. I won't go into it, but that happened to me last summer when Dave and I visited Fort Ontario in Oswego, New York. And we went into the old jail cell. I went into the old jail cell and I had my millimeter and I was just getting huge spikes and then boom, it was gone completely. It was almost like whoever was there didn't want me there. And I actually got an EVP, I think, that basically told me to go away.
Right.
So it kind of reminded me of that idea as well. So very, very interesting. And if we do get to go back at some point in the future, I kind of want to explore that a little bit more. But I think the most amazing and just stupendous experience we had on the island was the last experience we had before we got ready to leave. And we went around the back of like the tool shed type building, the storage building, and there was like an old brick wall. And we set up the millimeter and the K2 there. And I was just watching the video a few minutes before we started recording today. And every time I watch it, I get, not only do I get a little bit teary-eyed, but I get like just amazed at the fact that both meters were going off at the same time in response. So you want to tell everybody about that one?
And we've talked about this quite a bit, but for whatever reason, going to the lighthouse, I'm going to give a little bit of information away about Haunted State. When we went to the lighthouse and investigated there, one of the members' fathers came through. And this was a location, I'll just say for Angela and her family, it was a very, very important location in their life. They loved Door County. They went to this lighthouse a lot. So the fact that her father came through was not necessarily as crazy as the fact that my mom came through. But when we went there, I think I may have even said it out loud to everybody. I have a feeling my mom's going to come through here, or maybe I just kept that inside. But I really felt like, even though I don't have a lot of communication with my mom now that she's gone, I really felt like this was going to happen. And why it happened there, I'm not sure. This was a stone wall that literally was like they had picked stones out of the ground and piled them up. You see these kind of stone walls a lot in New England in farm fields and stuff, where it's just kind of piles of rocks that we call them
field stones.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what this reminded me of. Yeah. All different kinds. And we just started to have a conversation. I think I even started the thing off with, "Hey mom, are you here?" kind of thing.
Yeah. Within a few seconds you were referring to your mom. Yeah. And it was amazing.
And that was it. And I think, there's so much to remember there. And there's stuff that when I watch the video, I too, like you, I do tear up because I really, not only was the interaction with the equipment cool, but there was a certain emotion that I was feeling that day too. And the part that I enjoyed the most was when I asked her what she thought of you. And I said something like to the fact that she was, what did I call you? Like a Looney Tune. A Looney Tune, because that's exactly what my mom would say. She would use that terminology.
I'm tearing up now.
They're a Looney Tune. And I said, she's kind of a Looney Tune, right? And the response on the K2 was very much like laughter. It was kind of like that, like somebody laughing, going, ha, 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 kind of thing. Yeah. So, I mean, it was very enjoyable. And I could have stayed there all day, too, and just had that conversation.
Gosh. Connecting with people, that connection to me, we connect a lot when you connect when you investigate, whether you have abilities or you don't, you're still connecting. But the fact that you and I, that was just such a personal, loving kind of moment. It was a bonding moment. And I remember one thing I said was, I really regret that I never met you.
Yeah.
And I think it was just such a personal bonding moment, not only for you and I, but for the three of us. Spike is coughing in the background if anybody can hear it.
Is he okay?
He's fine. It's typical Spike. He's looking at me like, what? What are you looking at? But it was such a bonding moment, and it was so personal, and it was something that I'll always cherish. And I just feel like that's your history. That's history. That's connecting with someone from the past. You reconnecting with someone from the past and me connecting for the first time with them and sharing this moment. And isn't that really, really what it's all about?
Yeah.
It was just a beautiful, beautiful time there. And it's something I'll always, always remember and always cherish. There's certain things in your life that you'll never, ever forget. And that's one of them. It's
one of those things where, like, it doesn't matter how often you go back there or any other location and the experiences you have, you'll never be able to recreate
no.
that day. I mean, it's just not going to happen,
Once in a lifetime.
Yep. Absolutely.
So that was just beautiful. It was an unexpected, absolutely beautiful visit to Cana Island and the lighthouse, and something that, I love lighthouses, but I never expected it to be that amazing. And so that's just, I felt like we told stories that day. And one of the kindest things that I think you may have ever done for me, when we were driving up to Door County a few days before, we were all in the car, and I get a lot of stuff that comes to me before I go to a place. So if my mind sets its intention that I'm going to be going to some place, things will come to me. And I remember giving you a few names in the car. I said, let's just remember at the lighthouse, this name, this name, and this name. Of course, I can't remember them now. It was a while ago. And as we were leaving, we stopped in they have the gift shop and everything and a museum. And we stopped in there, and I was looking around, and you came up to me, and now I'm going to get teary-eyed again, but you bought me this beautiful book that I have, and I'm looking at it now, about the lighthouse, about the island, and the history and a lot of the keepers. And believe it or not, and all I had were names, but believe it or not, 2 out of the 3, I was able to get an idea of who I picked up on.
Yeah.
One had been a lightkeeper in the 1940s, and I'm still working on the female that I picked up on. But I thought that that was just such a wonderful, kind thing that you did for me because it was unexpected, and it helped me kind of tie the history to the island. And the history and what I got to the island, and it was just really kind. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Yeah.
So we left there after you hugged the tree. We left there. We bounced around a little bit, got back to the car. And then on our way back to Oshkosh, we stopped at yet another place from Haunted State, the Door Peninsula Winery, which I had an amazing time with. And bought so much wine that I still have some left a year later. Luckily had it shipped home or we would have never made it on the plane. Just a little bit about the winery really quick. It was founded in 1974 by Mark Fells and Tom Alberts in a former 2-room schoolhouse. The schoolhouse was built in 1868. And it served Carlsville residents for nearly a century, closing its doors in 1963. It was chosen by the winemakers because of its thick basement walls, which made it perfect for storing wine, as well as the visual appeal of its Victorian-era architecture and bell tower. So we stop there, and we pull in, and we get in, and it's also a distillery. And can I tell you, this place is absolutely gorgeous. It is gorgeous, and it's huge. And the funniest thing about it, well, 2 things happened. The one thing was I didn't know the history of the place, and I'm going down. You go upstairs to go back sort of into the tasting room and stuff. You go down a little flight of stairs, and then you have to go down a second flight of stairs to the basement. So I go up the stairs, I go down and all of a sudden it felt different to me. Like there was some kind of weird energy shift going on. And I didn't say anything about it because I'm like, well, what am I just going to walk up to Todd and go, oh, Todd, it's different here.
Right.
It makes no sense until you mentioned it. And you explained that there's the certain place where I felt the energy shift was actually an add-on to the original
school
building.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. And the funny thing that happened was we really wanted to get down in the basement, and they weren't doing tours until Todd pulled the Haunted State card.
Wait a minute. I really didn't want to do that.
But the guy was in love with you. Like, he loved the show. They remembered the show. They knew about the show. And then we could do no wrong.
Right. We could have loaded up with wine and just walked out.
It was great. And I'm trying to be serious and not laugh, but he's literally like, I'll take you down there. Let's go. And so we got to go down there and walk around, and I did pick up on some energies and stuff. But one of the coolest things was they had a book of students. And it was handwritten. Kind
of like a grade book, right? Isn't that what it was? Yeah.
Yes. And it was students over the years and grade. I was just in love with this thing. I wish we'd played the card a little bit more. Maybe, I did take a couple of pictures and did look up some of the names. And I thought that was really interesting. But yeah. And so we got to go down there, and he was talking to Todd about, the show, and we all love it and everything. And it was a lot of fun. And so
and then we went up and drank wine.
Then we went up and drank more wine, and we were all just like so exhausted and drunk by the time that Dave drove us all back to Oshkosh. But that wasn't enough for us. Then we had to go to the cemetery and take some pictures for the show, some promotional pictures, which came out beautiful. And so we'll do a new round of them. We'll have to do a new round of them in Cleveland in September. But yeah, so that was a really neat thing. But I just thought that was so funny that we played the card the Haunted State card and got our way and got what we wanted. So that was a lot of fun.
It kind of went like, well, we had investigated here for a TV show called Haunted State. That's really all I had to say. And then it was like, oh, my God, so
and that's where it started. And then it just took off from there. And they looked at you like you were God. And it was hilarious. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun.
It was a great vacation.
Yes. So a lot of history, a lot of just wrapping up these 4 episodes, a lot of history, a lot of experiences, a lot of energy, a lot of learning who we are individually and who we are together, and shaping sort of our own investigation style and what we believe in things. And just a wonderful way to do it. But if anybody ever thinks that history and the paranormal world aren't connected, they're very, very wrong. And I think that vacation really proved it to us and sort of drove it home for us in those 3-4 days. So
absolutely. Let's take a break and get our spiel in.
You can find the Sandy and Toddcast on any of the platforms that you normally find your podcasts, including YouTube and Twitter. Be sure to like the Sandy and Toddcast on Facebook to keep up on the latest goings-on, including each week's episode. You can also join our group, Stay Weirdos, Friends of the Sandy and Toddcast, for more fun. Stay Weirdos is a safe place to share your thoughts, feelings, ideas, and random inappropriate memes without judgment. Sandy and Todd also have a podcast called the Empathecary Podcast. It's for empaths, by empaths. And if you know an empath, you might want to listen too. Find and like the page on Facebook. And finally, if you're thinking about starting your own podcast and just aren't sure where to start, Sandy and Todd can also help with that too. Mind Garden Media is their latest project where the dynamic duo can guide you every step of the way in your podcasting journey. Editing, producing and consulting is what they do. Like Mind Garden Media on Facebook or email them at themindgardenmedia@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for staying weird.
And another edition of the Sandy and Toddcast comes to a close.
That's right. Now, next week, we'll talk about my visit down to Pennsylvania and some history there and some of the experiences that I had and my near-death experience on a mountain.
I cannot wait for you all to hear this because it is typical Sandra, okay? It is typical Cassandra.
Of which I felt the effects for several days afterwards.
Of course she did. All right. Until next time, bye.
Bye.